You're listening to 16 Artists, a conversation series with young creators finding their way in the world. This podcast is presented in partnership with the Office for the Arts at Harvard, with support from the Harvard Alumni Association. Today, I'm super excited to present to you part one of a riveting and brave conversation I had with animator and illustrator Susan Bin and activist Iku Beck. If you'd like to hear us talk about the world-famous drag queen Trixie Mattel, the complexity of navigating class dynamics at Harvard, and the power of saying no to opportunities, then keep on listening. Susan Bin, the inaugural Women in Animation Scholar, and her work have been featured in books, film, TV, and video games. She has exhibited her art domestically and internationally and serves as a local community liaison for DFW area artists with organizations like the Crow Museum of Asian Art, Kinokuniya, and the Dallas Public Library, among others. She mainly works in cinema with an interest in horror and queer themes and continues to work on projects dedicated to opening up new tributaries of storytelling and talent. Ikutsimiskimaki Beck is a community organizer at Montana Women Vote, an organization that works to uplift the voices of low-income Montanans through advocacy, civic engagement, and policy change. Iku grew up in Missoula, the settler-occupied homelands of the Bitterroot Salish, and graduated with an AB in social studies. Iku's current artistic endeavors include a drawing project on Indian boarding schools in Montana, a mural installation with other indigenous artists of Missoula, and lots of beading. They are an enrolled descendant of the Blackfeet Nation, are a member of the Little Shell Chippewa Red River Métis, and are German American. I began our conversation by asking Susan and Iku to tell me about how far away Harvard feels to them 5 years out. Here's Susan.
There's this episode of by Trixie Mattel and Katya, where they're reflecting on, they're rewatching themselves from their season of RuPaul's Drag Race and everything they had to say about themselves. And just the fact that it's you can't even hate or you can't even criticize that person you were or feel embarrassed, or you can, but it just feels like a completely different person than you are now. I feel that way a lot about anything. I feel that way about me yesterday and also me this morning.
Also obsessed that you watch I've been, watching it religiously. Iku, have you seen this?
No, but now I feel like I should.
Oh, well, do you follow RuPaul's Drag Race at all?
I watched it freshman year of college, and that's the only time that I did. I apologize.
No, don't apologize.
No.
You're way ahead of the game. I wish I knew about it when I was a freshman. But there's two drag queens, Trixie Mattel and Katya Zamolochkova, who have a talk show on YouTube, and it's just completely random and hilarious.
I also want to say that I have many strong opinions about RuPaul's Drag Race that I don't think we're going to fit in the bounds of this podcast. I think it's really hard to see queer and non-white voices in anything. And one of the things that I like about Trixie and Katya is Trixie also talks about her experiences as being Native and also a drag queen, which I think there's an issue in the show about centering white queerness. So there's a lot of that going on.
Amen. Yep. Totally. Yep. And
okay, now I really care.
Yes.
I've only seen them in a few clips that I've seen on Instagram or something like that. So yeah, now I'm on their Wikipedia page, looking at their life. They're Ojibwe, which is cool, and that makes me excited. And now I care because I never see myself reflected in media. So
I think it's really interesting because also she's probably, I think if you go through the metrics, the most famous or the most successful drag queen in terms of launching a like a brand, like a personality and identity that has succeeded past the platform of the show and has kind of entered, for better or for worse, this kind of mainstream where, you know, they're being sponsored by Netflix. That's the main of the mainstream.
So many thoughts because I'm like such a Trixie Mattel stan. Like I've been playing with drag myself. Like I have a wig over there. I've been starting to get into it, and I think part of what really drew me in about her was that she is a folk singer-songwriter too, and she makes these kind of moody, like country folk songs while also having this Barbie-esque look and doing comedy and really raunchy comedy at that. And to see someone create a career and have an artistic practice that could span those tones was really inspiring for me because I, as a musician, have always felt like, oh, I'm either like a very serious musician or I'm kind of a silly, flippant queen. I can't be both. And Trixie's kind of showing that actually you can. I actually feel inspired to do something I've never done on the podcast, which is to play a clip for us to look at.
Oh, yes.
This is have you seen Trixie's interview with I was gonna say Hugh Hefner. Larry King. Here we go.
Person you'd least like to be stranded on a desert island with.
Oh, wow. Somebody who talks.
Childhood celebrity crush.
Oh, God. Zach Morris, Saved by the Bell. Do you remember that program?
Yes.
He was
First kiss.
maybe today. Still waiting.
Straight male celebrity you'd most like to see do drag.
Oh, God. Oh, someone big, like Shaq. Like someone big and masculine. Yeah.
Funniest or strangest fan encounter.
Oh, people on a daily basis walk up to me, panic, and tell me something extremely graphic and violent about their life. People will walk right up to me and go, Trixie, I was abused. And I'm always like, just now? You know.
Favorite episode of the Trixie and Katya show.
Oh, favorite episode of the Trixie and Katya show. I like the one about death. I like to go to the deep, dark stuff. I think in drag, we get permission to talk about some really heavy stuff in a fluffy way.
You have a theory about death?
I think it happens to most of us.
Yeah. Biggest splurge.
Oh, I collect guitars.
Drag name you give me.
Oh, girl, Larry Queen.
Yep.
Okay, I want to kind of go back to something, Susan, that you were saying about RuPaul's Drag Race and commercialization. And it reminded me of this moment that we had in college, which I hope you don't mind me talking about.
Like
which,
me and you?
yeah.
Okay, all right.
I don't know if you remember. I don't know if you remember,
I'm
but
scared.
oh, don't be scared. Don't be scared. It's like a heroic. You're a hero in this story.
Okay. Okay, share it. I need that.
So, you know, this podcast, you know, it's about artists at Harvard and I was a member of the Signet Society, which is one of these like private clubs for artists where the students kind of choose who gets in, and then you have access to the space and you have access to dinners, and it's part of this whole landscape of exclusivity and property and in unequal access at Harvard, which, you know, maybe has shifted a bit, I'm not sure. And what I will say is I loved being in the Signet Society. I loved all the artists there. And part of that process was each semester or something, the members would like reach out to artists that they wanted to kind of recruit and ask to apply. And Susan, I like reached out to you because I think what you do with design and animation and illustration is so cool. And we had lunch and I was telling you about Signet, and then a couple days later you emailed me and said, hey, I'm not gonna, you know, apply because I don't like being a part of organizations that exclude people, and maybe you can remind me the wording better, but I was really struck by that, especially because we're so acclimated to that kind of way of being with people at Harvard. And you kind of held this line, this kind of ethical line of like, I don't want to be a part of this group if it means excluding other people in this way. So my first question is, did I remember that correctly?
Well, first of all, Raylan, I have the memory, I have the mind of a sieve. So I don't even remember. I remember being invited to apply to the Signet. I don't even know how to pronounce it.
Signet.
Signet. Okay. Real
No,
French.
I'm just making that up.
But I actually, to be completely honest, I don't remember our conversation or our dinner or whatever we had.
That's really cool.
I also don't this is not on you. This is on me. And I don't remember actually responding. I mean, I remember I hold the same, like if you ask me now, I'd have the same response.
Yeah.
But I'm surprised that I actually verbalized that to you. I think well, proud of me. I'm
proud of you. It was like a teaching moment for me.
No, my God, no, because I will say, I think in a lot of ways when I was in college, I was very non-confrontational and also very like dumb. Like I would just say stuff and not think about the repercussions, or like not really, like I didn't really develop, I think, an awareness of impact over intent. And I just want to say that there were things that I believed in back then that I still believe strongly in now, but I didn't really understand what it was that I believed in. And I think now I can say that I believe in like prefigurative societies. Like you want to be a part of, you want to serve a community and you want to serve other people rather than serving yourself. And for me, if the methods and processes that get me to the thing I want to do aren't things that I want to see and envision in that final act, then for me, of course, also I live in a society, so I'm complicit in many ways in the violence of capitalism. But there's things that I just feel very stubborn about. And I guess that was one of them. And also I will say that my experience at Harvard is probably, I'm going to be completely honest. Because I've said this privately and also publicly, that I hated Harvard. In fact, I took a year off and I almost didn't go back. I didn't want to graduate, but my supervisors, I was working in LA at the time, and they were like, you should probably get a degree from Harvard, if you're not paying for it. And I was like, And then I did go back, but kicking and dragging my feet through it. And so my experience at Harvard was actually, a lot of it was off Harvard. I was working a lot of jobs, a lot of internships. I had a lot of friends that weren't at Harvard, a lot of friends in mass art, because I came from like an artist background and thought I was going to go to art school, and went to Harvard instead. And I kind of surrounded myself with people and individuals that were very had a similar mindset as me. So I never saw my place at Harvard. I saw my place somewhere else. And so it wasn't like a challenge for me to be like, I don't want to be a part of this. Like I didn't have any stake in it to begin with. Also, so maybe don't give me too much credit, because it wasn't a risk for me. It was easy for me to say no. So yeah, that's that.
Thank you. I do give you credit though, because the power of saying no is underrated. And I think sometimes people just buy in to the system or just drink the Kool-Aid without thinking about it and believing in the possibility of opting out. Iku, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this paradox that I think some students at Harvard we find ourselves in, of wanting to build a better society or more inclusive society while being in an institution that is predicated on exclusion. What are your thoughts on that tension? And was there a way you grappled with it in your own experience?
That's a big question for me. I also had a similar experience in the fact that I hated Harvard, and I left and I came back, and I left after my first semester. Actually, I left during my second semester because I wasn't really understanding what was happening around me, and I wasn't really meshing with a lot of people. I didn't join very many clubs at Harvard. I don't know very many people from Harvard, just because I was in no clubs. I'm pretty sure we did I did Renegade when we started Renegade, which wasn't technically affiliated with Harvard. It was just Harvard students. But
Can you tell people what Renegade was?
Yeah, so Renegade was a group of, I guess now the term is BIPOC, but people of color and people who were non-white who wanted to have an arts community that didn't feel exclusive. I think a lot of people were experiencing things like the Crimson wouldn't let them write the kind of articles that they wanted to because it was, I don't know, they would be biased because it had to do with their own identity. And so we just started meeting, and it was really led by Jenny and Kimiko. They were like the editors of the magazine, basically, and then the rest of us kind of contributed in a lot of different ways. But that was really the only group that I ever like stayed connected to. And to some extent, I stayed connected to the Native group, but I never really did like any of the Native group activities. I just knew the people from it. One of the things when I reflect on my time at Harvard that I learned from that place is all of the things that I don't want to be. It taught me a lot more about the systems of oppression that to me were so far away, because I grew up in Montana. I now live in Montana. Again, I said this at the beginning, but like we don't really have rich people here. We have like wealthy-ish people. I mean, now we do. It's the pandemic has been really interesting because a bunch of rich people have moved to Montana, like rich white people have moved to Montana from other places. So like even in my apartment building, there's someone who's like from Florida who just like moved to Montana because he was like, oh, you know, like there's not as much of the virus here, so I just wanted to move here. I grew up with way less wealth and kind of this like abstract idea of who the oppressor was. And then I got to kind of like be in it with like one of the biggest oppressors in my opinion in the country, and probably in the world, based on how much money they have and the kind of people that they produce. And yeah, I mean, it's really funny to like try to talk to people anywhere else in the world about things like iBanking, right? Or like any of those words that I felt like were so common around me there. And no one in Montana gives a shit. Like no one gives a fuck about that stuff, because like that's just you building wealth upon wealth and like being a terrible person. Yeah, sorry.
Don't apologize.
Yeah, that was one of my biggest quarrels at Harvard, had to do with like the economics department and the lack of morality that a lot of people had there, including a vast majority of the professors lacked morality and didn't teach any kind of ethics around how to treat human beings on a mass scale to people. Yeah, I think I had a really hard time with the exclusivity of it. I remember getting in arguments my freshman year with people over like whether or not people deserved to go to Harvard, because I don't believe that anyone deserves that, right? I think that the word deserve is a very weighted, morally weighted word. Yeah, I think over time I did, though, definitely buy into that, like, they feed you that you're like this really intelligent person, you're this special person, you like got there because you're special. And I definitely like after college, I was like, I had to get back into the mindset of like, I'm not special, I'm just like everyone else. But one of the times when I called my family back home, I was like, these white people are crazy. I'm half white, by the way, but so I get to say that. I'm kidding.
Me too.
Yeah. And my family was just like, you should start taking notes and just like write a book about how crazy white people are later on in life. So I just like have notebooks.
Same,
like notes
same.
from
Absolutely
like
same.
weird conversations that I had with people there, and like dinners that I ended up at, and all kinds of, that's so interesting that you also have that. But yeah,
go through my Twitter. I live tweeted this shit.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Just listening to conversations. Like I'm gonna snitch on the next like Secretary of State. Like damn, this shit is wild. I had bingo cards for like some of my gen ed classes of the dumb shit people would say. Like,
oh my God.
I was like, okay, like comparing humans to animals. We got that. Like.
Well, thank you both for, and Iku, for speaking the truth. And I think these are questions that a lot of us maybe grapple with afterward, and maybe a lot of us are sort of late to waking up to that after graduation. I count myself in that group because we're made to feel so special. But I also think there are people who need to hear exactly what you're saying, who are at Harvard right now, or who are in the alumni community. And something I grapple with is like the paradox of like, it also being the place where I met you both and other amazing people who have helped me question the institution. And those feelings are complicated. First, I'd love to ask, since we're gonna have classmates listening to this episode, and I think you're speaking some hard-hitting truths, and I'm very grateful. bringing in a perspective we don't always hear. If you were to give them a message, there are probably people here who are in the midst of their iBanking or similar careers, some probably also shifting directions, maybe questioning their careers. Is there something that you would want to say to them?
Yeah. So, especially for people that either have wealth privilege or will have wealth privilege, this is something that I wish I would have had more conversations with people about when I was there, is to use that wealth in a way that will positively impact low income people in the US. There's so many different ways that you can do that, but if you're going to build wealth, then you should be giving it back in different ways. So, I mean, everyone can make their own decision about how they want to live their lives, but classism is a huge issue in the US. People are dying of it. It's integrally linked to race. And if we're looking towards a world of hopefully less inequity, then we do need to like chip away at wealth disparities.
Preach. Thank you. So you do advocacy
Yeah.
as part of your job. Can you tell
Yeah.
us a bit more about your work?
Sure. So I was a caretaker for a while, and then I started working for a progressive organization, nonprofit called Montana Women Vote, which at this point, not very many women actually work there. No men work there, but we mostly work with people who are from quote unquote like marginalized gender backgrounds. So whether that's being woman, being trans, etc. in Montana, you're going to be oppressed. And I started working there as a story collector for Medicaid expansion. So in Montana, we have a really nice, actually, Medicaid expansion program. Over 100,000 people in Montana are on Medicaid. Medicaid expansion is just, I think it's like if you make 150% of the poverty line, you can still get onto Medicaid and have a lot of different things covered, a lot of your health covered. It's a great health insurance program, and it's always in threat by the legislature. It's actually the legislative session right now in Montana. Cut me off whenever you need to, because otherwise I will end up rambling about this for a really long
No,
time.
this
But
is good.
once every 2 years, the Montana legislature meets for up to 90 days and they make all the laws for the next 2 years. And like, I think most states, like they're constantly in session, but we only have one session. And there's currently a COVID outbreak in the Capitol, and they had to shut down the Capitol last Friday and Monday. And then they let everyone back in with their masks off again. But any hoodle. Yeah, so we, as an organization, we try to like have conversations with a lot of these legislators, mostly to do advocacy for low income Montanans. And, we're playing a long game, like a really long game. And that makes it really unsatisfying often. Like we are trying to dismantle essentially capitalism, right? And that's not going to happen in my lifetime. It's just such a long game, which is why I'm glad that I get to talk about and like think about art a lot, because to me and one of my coworkers, we just like talk about art every time that we get sad because our work is really sad. Like it's going to make us every day at some point, we're going to get sad about our work because, yeah, when you're playing the long game of organizing, it's not going to happen in your lifetime. And you can't just live like an unsatisfying life with this idea of like an ideal in the future of a world that you want to live in. So art is really the only way for me to feel like I can build a life that's worth living for me in like the present, while doing these like long game maneuvers to try to lower the levels of inequity in our society.
That's really
My day
powerful.
job is taxing. We've been trying to figure out more ways to make it more exciting and engaging. I'm really lucky that I have a coworker who's really good at writing proposals for art projects. So we get to do a mural this summer. It's on the back of Planned Parenthood in Missoula. Planned Parenthood is a very hated place. Yeah, like super hated. We actually just had like at least 5 really terrible anti-abortion bills passed. So I'm really glad there was a really, really bad amendment in Montana Medicaid. You can actually get an abortion while on Medicaid, but they tried to add an amendment where you had to go to court, a court that wasn't a real court. It was a court of white men appointed by the governor to decide whether or not you can get an abortion. Luckily, that one died. But there's a lot of weird things like that happening in Montana right now. And I think that coming from campaigns that are going across the country to try to get guns on campus, to try to get white supremacy allowed on campus as freedom of speech. But yeah, they wrote a little like mural application. I'm real lucky. My mom is an ethnobotanist. She learned from her great grandma and from our aunties how to use like Blackfeet plant usage, basically. And so we have some knowledge about what plants are used in reproductive settings. So be it like uterus care over time, or if you need an abortion, there are plants in Montana that when you mix them, you can get a safe abortion. And so those are the plants that are going onto the mural. We're hoping to have some like outdoor conversations about it this summer. Trying to find any ways in which to make the like long game of organizing for justice more interesting and just like more comforting in our daily lives, because we have to do it, right? But we don't have to suffer while doing it. I hope.
Definitely like the hand holding meme, you know, that one in Texas. The Texas legislature is also the same way as it is in Montana. So right now they're in session, and I'm sure you are aware of the terrible bills in Texas as well. Many of them are very similar. Like there's some hot topic ones that, you know, are kind of the big key things, like, you know, anti-trans bathroom bills. But I think one of the big ones that's a long game thing is that this is the year they're redistricting. And I definitely sympathize with, I myself in my own practice am very like radical and leftist, but I know if you want to play to win, there's a lot of concessions that you have to make to get there, and you don't have to be happy about it. But I agree, being an organizer, being a participant, an active participant, is difficult. Just, you know, solidarity and power to you, really.
This concludes part 1 of our conversation with Susan Bin and Iku Beck. If you'd like to hear about art as a healing alchemy, Lil Nas X's Montero music video, and Iku's project illustrating Indian boarding schools, make sure to check out part 2. This episode is brought to you by the Office for the Arts at Harvard and the Harvard Alumni Association. The Yangqin music in today's episode is provided by yours truly. The clip you heard came from Larry King's YouTube channel. Final edits and mixing were done by Shez Manzoor, with production support from Bryce Norton Hennelly. You can learn more about Susan and Iku at 16artists.com. And if you have any feedback or questions about this podcast, you can reach me directly at REYLXN on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. My name is Raylan Yount. Thanks for listening to 16 Artists.